Hi, it's Katie and welcome to another food prep video. This time I have some meat that I got on sale at the grocery store. I need to pack it up for the freezer, some ground pork and chicken. To get ready for my meals for the week, I'm going to make my taco meat and red beans for my taco salad, my hamburger buns, and my jerk chicken marinade. And then for some basic prep, I'm going to make a loaf of sandwich bread to have on hand. So I'm going to start by packing up the meat for the freezer. This is ground pork, but you can do the same thing with any ground meat. And I'm just packing it down into mason jars. These are freezer safe mason jars. You cannot use a mason jar unless it is freezer safe, or else it will crack and ruin your food. So I'm packing it down, leaving an inch headspace, and as long as you pack it down tightly and remove any pockets of air, there's very little surface area for freezer burnt, and it does a really good job protecting your meat. So I'm packing these into 8-ounce mason jars. That's a half pound of meat, which I use for some recipes. And then I also have 2 pint-sized jars, which hold 1 pound of meat, and I use those for other recipes. So just pack it down tightly. Make sure you're using a freezer-safe mason jar, and make sure you're leaving 1 inch of headspace, and you'll be fine. So I use the 2-part lids when I pack these up. That way, if the food expands, it might dent the lid a little bit. So I'd rather it dent the 2-piece lids than to break my plastic lids. And then I just wash the outside of my container because sometimes it gets contaminated on the outside. So just wash it out with some soapy water. For the chicken thighs, these are boneless, skinless chicken thighs, and if I had a little more time, I would have trimmed them up a little bit, taken off some of the excess fat, but I'm just going to use my food saver to pack these up because they're irregularly shaped and they don't pack down in a mason jar as well as ground meat does. I do use my food saver for this. If you see how I'm packing it in this plastic container, there's so many pockets of air, there'd be lots of surface area to get freezer burnt, and it wouldn't keep your meat fresh for very long at all. That plastic container is what I'm going to be using this week, so I'm just going to pop it in the freezer for a few days until I need to use it. So for the rest of the packages, I have 5 boneless, skinless chicken thighs in there, and I also wash the outside of those, because even if you're careful, the chicken juice goes everywhere. Just make sure you're washing your containers with sort of lukewarm soapy water so you don't raise the temperature of your meat. Next, I'm going to make some beans. There's a lot of ways to make beans. You can do long soak, quick soak, hot soak, no soak, cook in your pressure cooker, cook on the stovetop, cook in the slow cooker, cook in the oven. There's lots of ways. I've tried many ways. This is going to be a new to me way, and it's sprouting the beans. From what I read, this makes the beans more nutritious and easier to digest. So what's not to love? The only thing that's not to love is that it takes a long time. So that's why I'm doing 2 pounds at a time. So this will be several recipes worth. So I just rinsed them and sorted through them, and now I'm going to cover them with some water and let them soak. So this is the next day after about 12 hours, and they've soaked up all the water and they've actually come out above the water. That's fine. I just need a larger container. So I'm going to rinse them very, very well. I'm going to do them in batches since I have so many. Just rinse them until the water runs nice and clear. And then I'm going to cover them with water and let them soak another 12 hours, so that'll be 24 hours total of total soaking time. And I'm going to divide them up over 2 containers since I have so many. So this is what it looks like after the full 24-hour soak. I'm just going to drain them and rinse them very well. And then I'm just going to put them back in the bowl, and I'm not covering them with water, but I'm also not drying them. They're just moist in there, I guess. And I'm going to cover them with a towel. I'm going to rinse and drain them every 12 hours. And after 4 days, it looks like this. And I think there's supposed to be more of the beans sprouted than this, but after 4 days, I just had to proceed. I needed to use these, and I was sick of looking at them. So this is what they look like. Some of them are sprouted, a lot of them aren't, but I'm going to go ahead and cook them. And I'm just going to cook them in my pressure cooker like I normally do. Just put them in the pressure cooker, cover them with a couple inches of water, and I'm going to add salt. I don't care what anybody says. Adding salt does not make your beans tough. Not adding salt makes your beans bland. So I always add salt, never had a problem. And it only takes about 8 minutes in the pressure cooker, and the beans are nice and tender. So I'm going to divide them up into these quart-sized containers, and this would be the equivalent of a 28-ounce can or 2 15-ounce cans. I cover them with some cooking liquid so that they have less surface area to get freezer burn. Again, you just want to have as little surface area as possible, and then I'll pop these in the freezer To use these, you can pop them in the microwave, put them in the fridge overnight to thaw, or you can kind of loosen them out of the container, put that chunk of ice and beans in a colander and let warm water run over them, and that will thaw them pretty quickly. Alright, next we're going to move on to the taco meat, and I'm just going to toast up some seeds. I have cumin seeds and coriander seeds, toasting them in a dry skillet and stirring them constantly so that they don't burn, and this just takes about 2 minutes. And when you start to smell roasty toasty seeds, then you just take them off. I'm going to put them in my mortar and pestle, let them cool, and then just crush them up. I like the seeds kind of coarse, so I don't crush them all the way. You could use a coffee grinder, or you could just use powdered spices. I just like to do this extra step. And then because I'm using kind of fatty meat, that's why I'm going to do a big batch of this, because I feel like this really fatty meat's not good for a lot of my recipes. So I'm going to go ahead and make a bunch of taco meat and have some in the freezer. So normally I like to season my meat as it's cooking. I feel like it picks up a lot more flavor. But if I were to do that, then when I drain the fat away, I would lose all of those seasonings. So I'm going to go ahead and fry it till it's pretty much mostly done. If it's still a little bit pink, that's not a problem. Drain away that fat, put it back in the pan, and now I'm going to season it. So I'm going to add a medium onion that's coarsely chopped. I'm going to add some salt and pepper. I'm also going to add some garlic. It's probably about 2 or 3 cloves. And then I have this chipotle salsa. This is like chipotle and adobo salsa you get in the little can. I put it in baggies like this and put it in the freezer so I can just break off a little chunk and add to my recipes. So I'm going to cook that and add those seeds and just cook and stir and just let this fry together until the onions are tender and the seasoning is all throughout all the meat. So that just takes about 8 to 10 minutes. Then I'm going to put it aside and let it cool completely and pack it up for the freezer. So I'm going to pack the meat up in these plastic containers, and I'm just going to use these in the next few weeks because these probably won't last very long in the freezer because there is so much surface area. Like I said about before, you want as little surface area as possible. These containers have quite a bit, so I'll have to use them pretty soon. That last little bit of taco meat is what I'm going to use this week, so I'll just put it in the fridge. Next, I'm going to make my hamburger buns, and I've showed this recipe before. I have a whole video showing how to make the dough and how to form them into hamburger buns and hot dog buns. I love this recipe. It has never failed me. I make it all the time, and it's got a lot of whole wheat flour in it, which I really like. So I'm just going to mix up the dough and then knead it by hand for 8 to 10 minutes. And then I'll go ahead and form them into the rolls. I'm going to make 5 hamburger buns for now, and then with the rest of the dough, I'm going to make some hot dog buns, and I'm going to try to freeze them already shaped in the hot dog bun shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of wrap these up in some wax paper to try to keep them from sticking to each other, because I'll pull these out of the freezer, put them on the cookie sheet, and then let them thaw and rise at the same time. So that's my plan. I've frozen this dough before. It works fine. I don't think I've ever frozen them in the shape, so we'll see how that turns out. The hamburger buns that I'm going to use this week, I'm going to go ahead and put on this cookie sheet, let them rise, and bake them. Next, I'm going to work on the jerk chicken marinade, and this recipe is online. It's on All Recipes. It's really great. I've used it a lot. It's a little bit time consuming to make the marinade because there's chopping up the fresh vegetables and there's a whole bunch of spices to measure out. So when I make up a batch, I might as well make up 2 batches, and that way I can have one in the freezer, so next time it's ready to go. So just as easy as using a store-bought bottled marinade, but a lot better. So I have some scallions and jalapenos, some brown sugar, cloves, allspice, nutmeg, fresh thyme. I'm just putting the amounts in each of these containers. For the liquid ingredients, it's distilled white vinegar, soy sauce, and a little bit of oil. And I'm just going to pack these up. They're going to both go in the freezer, and then the one that I'm going to use this week, I'll just pull out the night before I need to use it. So this is my sandwich bread that I wanted to make, and you saw me make bread dough already in this video, so I skipped that part. But this is a 3-loaf batch of whole wheat sandwich bread. I will link the recipe that I used down below. And I use my kitchen scale to make sure that my loaves are even. I guess this is optional, you could just eyeball it, but I like to have them be pretty consistent so I know how far they're supposed to rise up and all that. and I'm going to form them into the loaf shape, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I usually do it. I actually got an email from one of you lovely people. One of my viewers sent me a link to sort of a new technique for rolling loaves, so I'm going to try it out for the first time. And I'm going to grease up my bread pan there, and instead of just folding it in thirds, the bread dough in thirds, or rolling it up, you do sort of this head and shoulders technique. So you just put the corners in and then roll it down, and I will leave the original link down below so you can see exactly how to do this, but I thought I would give it a try. It's supposed to make your sandwich loaves turn out excellent. So once I have that sort of shaped, I put it in my greased bread pan there, and I'm going to put that aside and let it rise. And then with the other two portions of dough, I'm going to go ahead and form the loaves as well. I'm going to try to freeze these in loaves so that next week and the next week I can just pop them out of the freezer into the pan and again let them thaw and rise at the same time. So I don't want these loaves to stick to each other, so I'm going to wrap them in some wax paper, and then I'm going to slide those 2 wax paper covered loaves into a gallon Ziploc bag. This is what my bread loaf looks like after it's risen. Baked it for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to paint on a little bit of melted margarine just to keep the crusts off. And like I said, this bread turned out excellent. I'm very happy with this bread. That's what it looks like all sliced up. It worked perfectly for my family this week. So that's it for this time. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know I have a lot of information. I try to make these videos short and sweet, but a lot of this stuff I learned from trial and error, so I want to give you as much information as possible so you have less trial and error than I do. Alright, thanks for watching, guys!